Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. The classic green bean is around 5 to 6 inches long and, well, green. But there are some other options you can grow. Today we'll look at some of them. Also, we're planting in a 5-gallon bucket. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plots. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Dr. Natalie Baumgartner. Natalie is the Residential Consumer Horticulture Specialist for UT Extension, and Walter Battle will be joining me later. Hi, Doc. I know you like talking about green beans, don't you?
I do. I feel that tomatoes get maybe even too much attention.
They get a lot of love.
Right? Yeah.
They get a lot of love, that's for sure.
So I came from a very serious green bean family. In fact, it's really funny. We'd eat any tomatoes, but we were picky about our green beans.
So y'all liked it that much?
Yes.
How about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about the different options of green beans that are out there for us.
Right, yeah. So actually, bringing up tomatoes,
Okay,
it's
please.
interesting because there are some similarities in growth habits, right?
Okay.
So we actually would have the option of a bush bean, which think of as a determinant,
Okay,
right?
I
And
got
then
you.
we have pole beans, which are an indeterminate, right?
Okay.
Continue to produce leaves and flowers over a much longer plant. And funny enough, we literally have something that's in the middle too. We got half runner, or we could almost think of it sort of as a semi-determinate. So we have a variety in growth habit as one of the first things to consider.
Okay. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I learned something new. Golly,
Yeah.
how about that?
So, that is, of course, it, depends on your setting. Do you have enough room for, say, a traditional teepee or cattle panels, mesh netting? It can be very good for pole beans. So for those, we're gonna need some kind of a vertical structure.
So they have to go up. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, it is easier if you have some kind of a structure for your half runners.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw in a little comment about half runners because they're
let's hear it.
sort of like a geographically nuanced favorite, right? So I am from the western side of West Virginia, and kind of
Okay.
the middle part of Appalachia is half runner territory. And so it is the only thing that my grandmother would eat. It's the only bean that we ever grew.
Okay.
And I say that because I feel like you may be from kind of outside of half runner territory.
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Originally from Mississippi, yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pole beans, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
that
so
sounds- yeah.
then as you get a little bit further south, then you get into more pole bean
pole beans.
territory.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, your more traditional true bush beans are kind of grown,
yeah.
grown everywhere.
Can you talk
So-
a little bit more about those half runners though? Because I don't think many people know about those.
Yeah, so they are, kind of a semi-vine
Okay.
type. And I mean, early, on, like you used to be able to find them a lot kind of in small scale, you pick or a market garden. So, I mean, they are, harvested more mature lots of times than what you would say, a fillet type bean, but most of the time they are eaten, and we don't dry them like we would, a pole bean,
okay. I
for
got
leather
you. Okay.
britches. So,
Okay.
for us, they were a traditional canning bean, but a high quality half runner, you'll be able to get a fairly mature bean in the pod and still retain a fairly tender bean. So this is, the crucial quality factor. And some of we now have heirloom options and, a lot of seed collecting. And so for half runners, the big thing is a non-tough half runner because,
that?
yeah.
I like that. So that's why grandma liked them like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So we can talk about some of those.
So for our, these are actually some selections that we've done in our home garden variety trials.
Nice.
And lots of times what we try to do is make sure that we have, a more traditional bush option. And when we think about the bush beans, a lot of times what we see now are ones that can be bred as a processing bean, right? So those are going to be straight, often dark green, a snap flavor, snap crunch, and, not very much bean. Not very mature, when they're harvested.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Got it.
mostly pod. And so lots of times, but very space efficient, we start to get into good disease, resistance options. A lot of times some of our more common rust or our mosaic virus will have in a lot of those newer
nice.
bush beans.
Okay.
So, so we always try to have some, kind of standard bush beans. Some of our favorites over the years, Jade, Crockett. And then we kind of get into, last year we grew Contender. It was very, it performed very well. Provider. So all of those, are standards and have done well in our trials. Then you go into kind of the filet category, which is a thinner bean harvested very immature. And I always smile when I talk about filet
I can tell you like this, yeah.
Because there are some folks who, I enjoy a filet bean.
Okay.
But it is not everybody's taste because we're eating mostly pod, right? So kind of an old-fashioned bean eater will say, what is wrong with this bean? There is no bean in my bean, right? And so, so filet beans, but there are some good cultivars that can be pretty compact. Mascot's an All-American Selections winner that has a nice compact plant. Maxabel has been one that's performed well in our trials. It's a longer bean, so they do tend to be small. So it takes a while to pick them, right? So I like the larger ones.
Okay.
But there's lots of fun in terms of, you have wax beans, which are yellow.
Okay.
And then one of our favorites from 2 years ago are actually cultivar called Amethyst. And so they're gorgeous purple.
Amethyst.
Raw. If you cook them, they turn green. But there are, a productive bush bean, and so that combination of color, can be really, really great addition to summer salads and things like that. Yeah, they'll look very similar to your green beans.
You like that, don't you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we move into the pole.
Hey, come on to the pole beans.
Category.
Come down
yes.
south. Okay.
And I will say that much like when I talk about heirloom tomatoes, I try to never be too definitive about pole beans, right? Because this is serious territory, and we don't joke around.
Pole bean country.
Yeah, with things like that. So some of our favorites from the trials, Kentucky Wonder has done very well, and what we have really enjoyed doing over the last few years is even some heirloom and kind of some unique cultural elements.
Okay.
So one of our favorite heirlooms, I actually have a few with me. These are rattlesnake. Yeah. And they are, you can see kind of a little bit of a speckled bean, but they have a mottled purple and green pod also. They are gorgeous. I know that people may not believe that beans are highly photogenic, but they are beautiful.
They're beautiful. We
Beautiful
actually
beans.
grew some in the family plot garden, so we know about that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
So we
beautiful.
love the rattlesnake. Kentucky Wonder, of course, traditional green. Some of our other favorites have actually been, last year we grew turkey crawl, which, and you got to enjoy kind of the Appalachian history of this, right? So where do you think that it came from? Turkeys crawl, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
so it is a beautiful speckled bean. And the fun thing about some of those heirlooms is that you can eat them fresh.
Okay.
As a snap type bean, or they can be great for leather breeches, for drying. So lots of fun in the bean territory. Yeah.
All right. But if you get the resistant varieties, you don't have many issues with green beans, right?
Yeah. So
diseases or pests, right?
You're moving into management.
Yeah, just management.
Yeah. So selection is my favorite topic. As you
Okay.
know.
Okay.
Management
I can tell. Yeah.
is fairly straightforward for most beans. So well-drained soils, can keep us away from some of those challenges. With resistance, the rust, mosaic viruses, we can largely avoid. I think that I see more insect pests with beans than disease. Would you agree in your experience?
You know what? I do agree with that. Okay.
And so our favorite
good
is
assessment.
our favorite pest that we dislike, right, is of course the Mexican bean beetle.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so it is the pest in a family of really helpful beetles, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
same family as our beneficial lady beetles, but it is a leaf feeder.
Yeah.
And so, early, scouting, you can even trap crop. Even if you don't
Let's
like
hear it.
filet beans, you can always use them as a trap crop, and then you just pull them up and throw them away, and they provide a service
provide
of
it,
protecting
right.
your pole beans and your half runners. Right?
I got
so,
it.
Yeah, so even in the
got
pole
it.
bean south, filet beans will will have a very valuable purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Green beans, right?
Yeah.
By Dr. Natalie Baumgartner. She likes talking about them. Appreciate that. That's good.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, right?
They are gorgeous.
It's getting to be late spring and we're starting to see temperatures with highs in the 80s. We're already starting to see some signs of this spinach bolting. So this particular leaf right here is kind of what we expect the spinach leaf to look like. But if you notice, it's starting to get more elongated and arrow shaped. And if we look right here, this spinach is actually starting to form its flower stalk right here. Just because the spinach is starting to bolt doesn't mean that it tastes bitter yet. But the way that I do it is I come out here in the garden as I go to start picking the spinach, I look at a plant and I think, well, that's looking like it's starting to bolt. So I'll just take a little bit of the leaf and taste it and see if it has the bitter taste of a spinach plant that is bolting. That one doesn't. So I could go ahead and harvest this plant and it would taste just fine. I have a plant here that a few days ago had the flower stalk growing on it and I cut it off. So let's see if it's good. That is starting to get a little bit bitter. So I probably won't pick this one plant, but I can pick the rest of the plants and bring them inside and use them. Now, in a matter of a couple of days, I expect that I won't be able to harvest any more off of this spinach crop because it will all have been bolted. But that lets me get a little bit more before it goes.
All right, Walter. I see we have a bucket on the table. What are we going to do today?
Well, you know, there are a lot of people who simply do not have the space to garden.
Okay, sure.
And, you know, me being a person that like to kind of watch my money a little bit, I was walking through a garden center one day and I saw where you could have these, you know, tomatoes already in a pot, and they were getting like $17 for those things.
Wow.
You know? So I said, well, wait a minute. Is somebody like me who got a bunch of old buckets sitting around the house or whatever, you just plant my own. So basically, you know, what I did, I got my bucket.
Okay.
Now you want to make sure, I really like to see you get a new bucket though.
Okay.
Because, you know, if you're using something that used to, be, you know, have like petroleum products in it
good
or
point.
some kind of chemical or something,
Very good
that might
point.
have some kind of residue in there that, you know, may, you know, work against you.
Okay.
So, but basically what, what I did, I go and I get my drill and I drill some holes, and these right here are 1 inch holes, but you can use 1/2 inch holes, just whatever, as long as water can drain out of it.
Okay, so that's why you put the hose in the bottom.
Yes, yes. And I always follow that little step up, Chris, by putting me some landscape fabric, just, you know,
How about that?
off in that, you know, just to cover that up a little bit, so that, you know, we won't have a problem. And then I even add a few rocks in there. And let me see, I won't make too much noise here, but I put some of that in there just to hold that down and make sure everything is fine. You see what I'm saying?
And it'll probably help with drainage as well.
Oh, absolutely, it's going to help with the drainage. And then I begin to mix my soil.
That looks
Now,
good.
Yes, what I did, I purchased some already made organic soil, but I did add a little calcium to it.
Okay.
I did put some lime in this.
Okay.
And all I simply do is just, you know, just pour some of that in there. Let me get it started before I dump it. But I add something else to this organic. I also add a little bit of cow manure. You know, and when you live near a cattle farm like I do,
It's readily available.
it's readily
sure.
available. So I mix that in there too. And then, of course, I'm gonna finish the rest of this out. Now you don't ever just fill it all the way to the top.
Okay.
You get it right there. And like I said, I added calcium to this. I put about a cup of calcium in here. And then, of course, I'm going to, let me get just a tad more to get my right.
So while you're doing that, 5 gallon, that's a pretty good size.
Yeah,
for
5
a
gallons,
container?
pretty good size, because tomato plants, and look here, I want to talk a little bit about
Okay,
that.
sure.
Tomato plants, they're going to put down quite a bit a good long root off in there.
All right.
Now, when you first get that, notice that these have good white.
Yes.
roots there. And another thing that I do when I plant tomatoes, I like to do what we call sucker them. So I cut off these little bottom ones right here, and let's see. And also these plants here that I got, you can use them. These were over on a rack. Now normally we say don't buy those
On the discount rack?
Yes, but I noticed that they were actually, it's just where they hadn't been watered.
Okay.
So, I saved some
So
money
you can
there.
save them. All right.
And then so I tear those little roots apart to kind of,
You tease the roots a little
just
bit.
tease
right?
them a little bit. And there we go. And we can set that off in there. Let me get that more in the middle. And then from there,
You just add
I just
more.
add more around. And let me tell you, you're gonna have some good tomatoes here. This variety here is Early Girl. It's a
Oh, yeah.
it's a
It's a
real
good one.
nice variety to use. And yes, there you go. This here will do wonders. And I even get all up around there a little more.
Okay. Now this would apply for more than just tomatoes, right? I mean, there's other
absolutely.
vegetables you can put in there as well.
Yes, as a matter of fact, you can put like one tomato plant in a bucket, but you can put 2 pepper plants.
Okay.
And one, you can also put maybe like one cucumber plant, squash plant. You can put one of those in there. I'm talking about in its own bucket.
Sure.
And hey, they'll grow fine. Now, one of the things about growing them in the bucket also, you can start them out early. You can get out there earlier. Another thing is you don't have to worry about weed control because you're pretty much controlling that. Now, I'm gonna tell you, if a pigweed or something comes in there, you put it in there.
Right.
It didn't come in there naturally. And another thing that you can move it around if
Yeah,
you
that's
need
what
to. You can have a little
about.
flexibility with that. And it's just all kind of benefits to growing in a bucket. And trust me, it does not cost you $17.
Right,
Which is
right.
always a good thing.
Right, that's a good thing.
But once again, I do want to emphasize, do not use an old petroleum bucket or something like that. That, if you see something like, lubrication fluid or something on the bucket, don't use that.
Okay.
But really just get your new bucket.
And let's talk again about the different soils you can use. Now, you actually put in manure. Why did you put it in manure?
Well, because I wanted to raise these kind of organically, and that's going to be a good source, for my fertilization and nitrogen and all that you get with the manure and all that. So that's why I use that. And again, once again, we do have people like to know where their food comes from, how it's grown. What better way than growing in a bucket?
That's right.
And as a matter of fact, I highly recommend people who live in apartment complexes that have
good
just
point.
those little ledges. Hey, this is an ideal way to garden. I mean, it just works perfectly.
Right, and I was once in an apartment, so yeah, that does work.
Yes,
I did
yes.
that as well.
And
Sure does.
also, I didn't bring any with me, but I would also put some mulch on top of this because when you water it, that would help this stay, moist and stuff, as well as hold that moisture in there. Because here in the Mid-South, once that June, July heat hit,
It'll dry out pretty quick. So let's talk about watering. How much would you water?
Well,
in a
basically,
5-gallon
I
bucket?
would keep this. I would try to give it like maybe an inch a week.
Inch a week,
Is
okay.
what I would look at, an inch and a half. But basically, just feel that soil. If it feels moist, nice and moist,
Okay.
you're fine. Now, we do not want to just saturate it with water.
Sure.
Because then we're gonna mess around and get all that old photophylla, root rot, and all this stuff developed in there, and you're kind of defeating your purpose.
Right.
So you just don't want to just saturate it, but of course, with those holes in there, it shouldn't saturate. But otherwise, just keep it nice and moist. About once a week, maybe twice a week. Go out there and just add a little water to it, just like you would water any other plant.
Sure. And you made the point about moving it as well, because I had to do that when I lived in an apartment.
Yes,
Make sure you
yes.
got enough sun. So that's a
Yes,
good thing
yes.
about putting them in, containers or 5-gallon buckets.
Exactly.
Move
You
it to
can
follow the sun.
Yeah, you can move it around, and also you can get you one of those little cages they'll work also. And that's what I would do with this one. I won't do anything but just put that little cage in there right now, and it'll just grow right up into that little cage, and you'll be fine.
Okay.
But like I said, this is just to me, it's really a neat way to even get kids to
I
garden.
agree.
A lot of times we see now that kids do not know where food comes from or whatever, and this would just really be a nice way to teach some kids how to garden, where food come from, and how they can grow things.
Something they
and-
could do at home. I agree.
Oh, yes. And if you're looking for a good science project, there it is
it.
right there.
Well, good stuff, Walter. We appreciate that demo.
Okay. Well, happy to bring
All
it
right,
here.
now we'll
yes.
see how that does. Huh?
Oh, okay.
We're gonna
yes.
test you out.
Okay. Well, we'll be slicing tomatoes before long.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
So we're in the square foot garden, and we are actually getting ready to put in some cantaloupe, or for y'all in the South, muskmelon. And this is actually going in the location where we just pulled out some turnip greens and some mustard greens. So we're right at that turnover between our cool and our warm season crops. And so this is raw seed, and in the square foot, we are actually gonna have 2 plants per square foot. And I'm gonna put 2 seeds in every one of my planting holes. I'm gonna put those just an inch or so below the ground. We don't wanna bury them too deep, but we wanna make sure we get them down in there enough that they don't dry out. So I'm putting 2 seeds in there to make sure that we get at least 1 good viable plant per location, and then we'll come back in here and we will thin as necessary. There's actually going to be room for these to vine. I know you're thinking about the space here, and so they're on the edge. They'll be able to vine and produce fruit back here in our aisleway.
All right, Doc, here's our Q&A segment. You ready?
Let's go.
All right, these are great questions. All right, here's our first viewer email. Okay, this is an interesting question. Can or should an iris need to be deadheaded to produce more blooming? And this is Chuck from Clarksdale, Mississippi. So what do you think? I mean, can or should the iris be deadheaded?
Well, so this soon gets us into the interesting but nuanced territory of reblooming irises, right?
Yes, so that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what do you think though?
Yeah, so I think that you might be able to provide a little bit of benefit if in fact that was a reblooming iris. But
See, we don't know that, right?
but most of the time for rebloomers, some fertilizer is recommended, so it may not be enough entirely to push. This always makes me think of like our local iris societies are really great resources for what reliably reblooms in different areas.
Right.
And so, a little bit of cultivar information there might help us. I tend to think of iris deadheading as more of an aesthetic factor.
I think the same thing. We're on the same page with this, right? Again, we don't know what kind of iris we're talking about, but I do know this, right? A lot of folks will actually cut back the stalks, right?
Yeah.
To produce it, prevent it from going to seed. Now, there's
Yeah.
some people that like the seeds and, hybridize and all those kind
Yeah.
of things, but most people that I know actually cut the stalks, because they don't want it to go to seed.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's cleaner,
Yeah.
and also it's just a little bit more energy that the plant
Yeah,
can expend
right.
in other areas.
That's right. All right. So Chuck, hope that helps you out. But yeah, if there's an iris society down there in Mississippi, Clarksdale, it's a good question for them.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good question. Hope that helps you out. Here's our next viewer email. I could use your advice. My 10-year-old red French Japanese maple is developing about 8 new stems in the lower area that are producing green oak-shaped leaves. Why is this happening, and do I need to trim them off? Will they eventually overtake the red French leaves? This is Teresa from Greenville, South Carolina.
This is like our special plant propagation set
Oh,
of
this
questions
is
here.
plant propagation, because we know this, right? The majority of your maples are grafted.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that you would want to make sure that your rootstock, which is what those shoots are coming from, would not be outgrowing your desirable scion.
Right. So if that be the case, then I'll just keep trimming those back.
Unless the multicolored is
Yeah.
interesting.
Which I would think is interesting.
Yeah.
I would, but but she asked about trimming them back.
Yeah.
I would just keep trimming them off. And
Yeah.
Eventually you don't have to worry about them anymore, but I would keep it.
Yeah.
I think it looks interesting to have the different leaf shapes and
Yeah.
colors there. So yeah, we appreciate that question. But yeah,
Yeah, it's a good one.
it's a good one. All right, thank you much. Appreciate that. Here's our next viewer email. I think you like this one too. I purchased more flower seeds than I needed this year. What is the best way to store flower seeds for next year? Thanks, and this is Carolyn. Don't you have a lot of seeds, right? You
Oh.
carry them from year to year, don't you?
Sometimes I just carry them around for fun.
Sometimes you just
Yeah,
do, right?
yeah. Cool and dry.
Cool and dry, right? And I always like to tell folks where you store them, how you store them, label them. Yeah. Make sure they're labeled. Like you
Yeah.
have there.
Yeah.
Make sure they're labeled, and I think you'll be fine. So, is there anything else you think they need to know besides cool and
Well,
dry?
I mean, when we say dry, I think that if you, like, this is not a good example because these are paper,
Okay.
but there are many seeds that come in a metallic or a foil-lined package.
Okay.
And so I would say if you have those, don't open them, right? Leave them sealed
That's a
because
good point.
that
Right.
will have much lower humidity and it'll make it easier to store. Sometimes we get questions about refrigerator or freezer, those types
sure
of
do.
questions. And so for short term, cool in a refrigerator would be, fine.
So that's fine for
Yeah.
the short term.
Yeah, I mean,
Right,
for
okay.
people who really want to store seeds for a very
Okay.
long period of time.
Okay.
And we just want to make sure that when we're putting them in a cool or a very cold place, that they're not too moist because that could cause more damage.
Got it. Got it. Great point. So yeah, thank you for that question, Ms. Carolyn. Hope that answers it for you. From somebody who saves a lot of seeds from year to year. All right. All right, Doc, that was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
Yeah, great set.
All right. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you have a problem in your garden bed, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have over 1,000 videos on all sorts of gardening topics. If you can't find the answer, send us your gardening question. We might just answer it on the show. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.